Dawn on December 26, 2004 began like any other peaceful morning along the shores of the Indian Ocean. The sea was calm. The sky was clear. Small waves gently rolled across the endless stretch of sand. No one knew that within minutes, the ocean would transform into a massive engine of destruction. An immense force was building beneath the seafloor, silent, invisible, and completely unstoppable. Nearly 30 kilometers beneath the Indian Ocean, and two massive tectonic plates had been locked together for centuries. The Indian plate had been slowly sliding beneath the Eurasian plate. Its movement was only a few centimeters per year, so slow that no human could possibly notice it. But energy does not disappear. It accumulates. For centuries, rock deep underground had been compressed, bent, and strained like a gigantic spring. Pressure increased, then increased again, until the final limit was reached. 7:58 a.m. Suddenly, a rupture more than 1,300 kilometers long tore open beneath the ocean floor. Within the first few seconds, the seabed surged upward nearly 10 meters. An area of the ocean floor as large as an entire country was violently lifted from its position. The water above had no time to react. The entire column of ocean water was thrust upward as if the sea had been punched from below. The earthquake reached a magnitude of 9.1, one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded in human history. The energy released was equivalent to more than 23,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs. The ground in Sumatra shook violently. Buildings rattled like toys. Roads split apart. Yet, on the surface of the ocean, everything looked almost normal. There was no storm, no violent wind, no visible sign that a catastrophe had just begun. For the first few minutes, the sea only trembled slightly. Then massive waves began spreading outward from the epicenter. Not ordinary waves. Juice was only a few meters. But beneath the surface was the full weight of the ocean moving with unimaginable force. In four directions, 4 massive tsunami waves began racing across the Indian Ocean. One heading toward Thailand, one toward Sri Lanka, one toward India, and one rushing directly toward the coast of Indonesia. These waves were unlike anything humans had ever seen. Each surge stretched for hundreds of kilometers. They were not just water. They were the entire ocean in motion. Meanwhile, along the coast of Banda Aceh in Indonesia, the morning continued as usual. Fishing boats headed out to sea. Markets opened. Coastal streets slowly filled with people. No one realized that just a few hundred kilometers offshore, a massive wall of water was racing toward them at terrifying speed. Banda Aceh had only about 15 minutes. That was all the time it had. No warning, no detection systems, no sirens, no chance to prepare. Out at sea, the tsunami was moving into shallow water. And when that happened, its true nature began to reveal itself. The speed began to decrease, but the energy remained the same. As the seabed rose closer to the shore, the entire mass of water behind it was compressed. The waves began to grow taller, 3 meters, 5 meters, 10 meters, and then even higher. Offshore, the ocean suddenly began to retreat from the coastline. A strange sight. The water pulled back hundreds of meters. The seabed was exposed. Fish flopped helplessly on the sand. Boats lay tilted on the suddenly dry beach. Many people stopped to look. They stared out at the ocean in curiosity. Nothing like this had ever happened before. Some walked farther out to see it more clearly. Some took photographs. Others simply stood there, trying to understand what was happening. But on the horizon, a dark line was rising. At first, it looked like a distant cliff. Then it grew larger, and larger, and higher. That was not a wave. It was the entire ocean standing upright. A wall of water more than 20 meters high was rushing straight toward the shore with unimaginable power. And by that moment, it was already too late to run. The first tsunami wave slammed into Banda Aceh with devastating force. The sound was like thousands of jet engines roaring at once. Water surged into the city at terrifying speed. Fishing boats were lifted from the sea like toys. Vehicles were swept away within seconds. Homes shattered. Entire neighborhoods vanished beneath the muddy torrent. But the most frightening part was that this was only the beginning. Because at that same moment, multiple tsunami waves were racing across the Indian Ocean, and millions of people in other countries had no idea that the disaster was heading straight toward them. Most of them were still enjoying a peaceful morning by the sea. In just a few hours, the ocean would swallow entire cities thousands of kilometers away from the epicenter, and the world was about to witness one of the most devastating natural disasters in human history. More than 1,000 kilometers away from Banda Aceh, the beaches of Phuket, Thailand were flooded with sunlight. The morning after Christmas is always one of the busiest days of the year. The ocean shimmered bright blue. Tour boats were leaving the harbor. Beachside stalls were beginning to open. No one knew that a monstrous wall of water was racing straight toward them at the speed of an airplane. Beneath the ocean, the tsunami was moving through the Andaman Sea. Far offshore, it was almost invisible. Just long rolling waves gliding silently across the water. But inside each surge was billions of tons of water. It did not stop. It did not slow down. Nothing could block it. About 2 hours after the earthquake, something strange began happening along the coast of Thailand. The sea level suddenly dropped. Anchored boats near the shore tilted sideways on the sand. The seabed stretched out farther than anyone had ever seen. Coral reefs, rocks, and marine life were suddenly exposed to the air. Many curious people walked farther out. Some ran down to collect stranded fish. Others stood taking photographs. It looked as if the ocean had suddenly drained away. No one realized that this was the final warning before the massive wave arrived. Offshore, the horizon began to distort. A dark curve slowly rose upward. Then it grew higher and higher. It did not look like an ordinary wave, and it looked like a massive wall approaching from the distance. Some people began to sense that something was wrong. Those standing farthest along the beach were the first to hear it. A deep roar, like thunder that never stopped. The sound grew louder, closer, heavier, and then they saw it. A massive wall of water tens of meters high rolling toward the shore. The distance closed rapidly. There was no time to think. Only seconds remained. When the tsunami slammed into the coast of Thailand with crushing force. Water surged across the beach like a sudden flood. But it was nothing like a flood. This torrent moved as fast as a speeding car. Beachside shops were torn away. Tour boats were lifted and thrown deep inland. Trees were ripped from the ground. Windows shattered. Within minutes, the peaceful coastline turned into a raging river of chaos. But a tsunami is never just one wave. After the first surge crashed inland, the water began to retreat violently. Everything it had just swallowed was dragged back toward the sea. Pieces of wood, boats, vehicles, fragments of buildings. Everything was pulled back into the ocean as if being sucked into a massive black hole. Then the horizon began rising again. A second wave. Larger, heavier. The coastline had become a battlefield between land and ocean. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away, Sri Lanka still had no idea what had already happened in Indonesia and Thailand. Morning in the coastal city of Gale continued as usual. A passenger train packed with travelers was moving along the railway near the sea. The train cars were crowded. It was a familiar route, passing small towns along the coastline. As the train approached a bend close to the ocean, the sea suddenly withdrew. Water pulled away from the shore. Passengers looked out the windows. They could see the seabed exposed for hundreds of meters. The strange sight drew curiosity. The train kept moving. No one knew that within minutes, a massive wall of water was racing toward the tracks. In the distance, the ocean began to rise. Not a wave, but a massive surge of water flooding toward land. The tsunami crashed into the coast of Sri Lanka with terrifying force. Water rushed across the railway. It slammed into the train. Within seconds, train cars weighing dozens of tons were thrown off the tracks. The torrent swept the entire train away as if it were nothing more than a toy made of metal. It became one of the most devastating moments of the disaster. But the tsunami was still not finished. It continued racing toward India. Along the coast of Tamil Nadu, coastal villages were just beginning their day. Fishing boats were preparing to leave the shore. Local markets were opening. Then small roads leading to the sea were filled with people moving about. Then the ocean pulled back, so quickly that many had never seen anything like it before. The sea vanished. The ocean floor appeared like a wet desert. Some people felt uneasy. Some began running inland. But most simply stood and watched. Far offshore, the horizon began to swell. A dark mass of water was racing toward them. When the tsunami struck the coast of India, it was not simply a wave. It was a dense wall of water carrying sand, mud, and everything in its path. Coastal villages disappeared within minutes. Fishing boats were thrown onto rooftops. Trees snapped apart. Roads turned into rivers. But the most terrifying part was the scale of the disaster. The tsunami was not attacking just one country. It was sweeping across the entire Indian Ocean. From Indonesia, to Thailand, to Sri Lanka, to India, and continuing toward Africa, and thousands of kilometers of coastline were being overwhelmed one after another. The ocean had become a force no one could control. Some places were as far as 8 hours away from the epicenter and still had no idea what was coming. On the shores of Somalia in East Africa, the afternoon was slowly settling in. The sea still looked calm. A gentle breeze moved across the water. There was no sign of any storm. But deep beneath the ocean, the tsunami was still racing forward. After traveling nearly 7,000 kilometers across the ocean, it had not lost its power. And within just a few more hours, these distant shores would feel the final impact of the fury that began deep beneath the ocean floor. By the afternoon of December 26th, seismic centers around the world were beginning to understand the true scale of what had just happened. Monitoring screens were shaking with activity. Seismic graphs stretched far beyond normal patterns. The vibrations from the earthquake beneath the Indian Ocean had not only spread across the region, they had traveled around the entire planet. Seismic sensors in Alaska detected it. Stations across Europe recorded it. Even instruments in Antarctica picked up the seismic waves. Scientists looked at the incoming data and immediately realized one thing. This was not a normal earthquake. Its scale far exceeded anything they had expected. The first numbers left many people stunned. The rupture beneath the ocean floor stretched more than 1,300 kilometers. A section of the seabed had lifted nearly 10 meters. The entire mass of water above it had been suddenly displaced, which meant one terrifying reality. When the entire ocean had been pushed at once, in the hours that followed, the first news reports began to emerge. At first, they were scattered and incomplete. A coastal town destroyed. A harbor wiped out. A city that had suddenly gone silent. But as satellites began sending images back to Earth, the true picture slowly came into focus. Thousands of kilometers of coastline had been devastated. Coastal cities had turned into vast flooded zones, and densely populated neighborhoods were reduced to their foundations. In many places, the land looked as if it had been violently scraped by an enormous force. Rescue teams began entering the affected areas. They moved through roads buried in mud and debris. Fishing boats sat stranded far inland. Vehicles were half buried in sand. Scenes of chaos stretched across entire coastlines. In many places, communication systems had completely collapsed. No electricity, no signal, no roads. Rescue helicopters flew constantly overhead. From the air, the scale of the disaster became clearer than ever. Long stretches of coastline had been erased. Towns that once bustled with life had become empty fields of debris. In some places, even the roads that once connected communities had vanished without a trace. In the days that followed, the numbers began to rise. At first, a few thousand, then tens of thousands, then over 100,000. The disaster of December 26th was eventually confirmed to have taken more than 230,000 lives, a number that shocked the entire world. It became one of the deadliest natural disasters in modern history. But what astonished many people the most was not only the power of the ocean. It was the silence before the catastrophe. There had been no warning, no tsunami detection system in the region, no signal to tell the coastal cities what was approaching. After the disaster, one major question began to echo throughout the global scientific community. Could this happen again? The answer sent a chill through many experts. Yes, and not just once. The Indian Ocean lies along one of the most active tectonic boundaries on the planet. Massive plates of rock are still moving a few centimeters every year. Pressure is still building beneath the ocean floor, which means powerful earthquakes in the future are unavoidable. But after 2004, the world began changing how it prepares for tsunamis. A global warning network started to take shape. Hundreds of sensors were placed along the ocean floor. Deep-sea pressure buoys constantly monitor changes in sea level. Satellites track movements across the ocean in real time. If a massive column of water is suddenly displaced again, the system can detect it within minutes. Warnings can be sent thousands of kilometers ahead of the approaching wave. That time can save millions of lives. Yet no matter how advanced technology becomes, the ocean remains a force beyond human control. A single earthquake deep beneath the sea, a shift in the Earth's crust. Within minutes, the entire ocean can transform into a massive engine of destruction. December 26, 2004 became one of the most powerful reminders of that truth. The Earth is not still. It is always moving. And sometimes, those movements can change history in just a few hours. The coastlines that were once devastated have slowly been rebuilt. Cities along the ocean have risen again. But the memory of that day still remains. A morning that began in perfect calm and ended as one of the greatest natural disasters humanity has ever witnessed. If you made it to the final moments of this video, leave a comment below. In your opinion, what is the most terrifying natural disaster in history? And if the ocean rises in fury once again, would humanity truly be ready to face it?